Mehrink. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Diane Purcell-Mehrink, and I'm a researcher working on seaweed. And my presentation today is called The Giant Kelp, Where Will They Live? Squelga, that's Ancalig, Olvor, Cogoni, and Shiad. Okay, so I'm just going to click through my slides. Hopefully this isn't too fast. So just here on the right-hand side, it's an image of the giant kelp. And they're giant because they are very, very big. They can grow up to about 50 meters in size. This image was taken by a friend of mine who works in Australia, in Tasmania. And I've popped a little arrow in to show you a little piece that is Tasmania that sits off the bottom of Australia. So this species is a fascinating seaweed. Grows particularly fast. It's one of the fastest, up to about 50 centimeters a day. Oh, sorry, in probably roughly a month, not a day. And in a year, it can hit probably up to 5 or even 5 meters or even bigger. So after we take them out of a lab scenario, these species can grow pretty fast once they hit the ocean. So the reason I'm talking to them about them today is because this species is in a lot of danger at the moment due to climate change. And this image here is taken by a colleague of mine, and it shows all the different parts of the world where kelp species live. And kelp are really just the brown seaweeds. That's the easiest way to describe them. What I've done is popped a few little circles in to try and show everybody where they live, the giant kelp only. All the other species are other brown species, but you can see on my image here that the giant kelp is off the coast of California, if anyone's been there, the South America, and predominantly then off the southern coast of the South Island of New Zealand and Australia. So it's mostly a southern hemisphere species. And then the really interesting bit is because it lives under the water, what does it look like? Well, the giant kelp is one of numerous species of kelp species. There's over 100 of them, and there's lots of letters here. But just to give you an overview, this is a kelp species that lives off the coast of South Africa, and then these three ones here are all species of kelp that live off Canada. And then this one here that looks very, very strange, the E image here is off Greenland. And then this one here that looks like it's been blown over. This one is off the coast of Norway. And then the last two images, this one G here is off Australia and H here is off South Africa. So there's a diver in this image, so you can see the size of these species versus a human. They are absolutely huge. And the reason they're called a forest is because they really do create a big ecosystem underneath the water. So those of you at the moment doing science in school will know all about ecosystems. And these are obviously green in color officially, i.e. they're obviously red, green, and brown, but what they are is they all photosynthesize. And what's really interesting about that is that they're the bottom of all the food chains. They're the producers. So if we don't have those guys, we can't have anybody else. So this is a bit of a wordy slide, so I won't put it up for too long. Just to show you the image on the top here is showing you the colors. So there's Saccharina here, it looks brown. Euchema here is greenish. Pyropia is the red species. So again, it's one that you might have heard of before. It's the one that we use for sushi. And Daria here, wakame, this is the one we use for our miso soups. And Gracilaria is another red species. The interesting thing is that the sea surface is about 2% of the ocean's surface is covered by seaweed, and up to 70% of the CO2 that we breathe out gets sucked in by these seaweeds. So there's lots of information about them. They about 30 million tons per year is harvested, and over 8 billion euros, and that's actually gone a lot bigger since even 2019. The production of seaweed is growing rapidly. About 50 countries at the moment are producing seaweed, but according to research lately, about 123 have the ability to grow seaweed. So just to give you an idea of the, I'll move that out of the way, sorry about that. I'll give you an idea of the products that you can get from these things. Why are they important to us? Well, about 85% of things that come out of seaweeds we eat. And here's a lot of things that, again, if you've been in science class, lipids or fats, protein are building blocks for our cells, polysaccharides and other substances. These are all things that seaweeds give us. And here's a few images. So as I say, we eat about 85% of the stuff that comes out of seaweed. This is a Welsh crisp company, and they're using a thing called laver, which is a red seaweed, to make it. Here is an image of a very handsome French, I think he must be a model, and he's putting seaweed foam on his beautiful skin. Over here on the right-hand side is an image of some pigments that are going to be used by a German company to dye their fabrics, and they're using seaweed pigments for that. So all the red seaweeds you can imagine could be excellent there. And this image here of a girl's back is actually a cotton t-shirt by an Irish designer, and she's using sea cell, which is actually a fiber that's made, which is now being incorporated into clothing. And then over here, superfoods. Well, that's just all of the micro and macronutrients and vitamins and that kind of part of our diet is now also incorporating seaweed quite vigorously. So just to show you guys where kelp grows, well, this is an image that I've designed with a colleague of mine, and this is a life cycle like you've probably seen for lots of things in your science classes. So an adult seaweed is here on the right-hand side. The dark area that appears normally on a frond or a blade, which is like a leaf, is where the fertile bit is, and it's called the sorus tissue. And what happens is when a seaweed is ready to basically expel all of its spores, the light normally triggers it, and what ends up happening is you get these zoospores, which have ability to move, and they get spat out into the ocean, and they can travel, in the case of the giant kelp, anything from a kilometer to 10 kilometers. And the interesting thing about this complex life cycle is you need males and females, so it's a sexual life cycle. And then they have to float along through the water column and then grow a little bit bigger and become gametophytes, so a little bit larger, more cells of a male and more cells of a female. And then they have to find each other, become fertilized, and then produce a juvenile sporophyte. So this is, again, a bit of science language. Here's an image. Oops, here's an image of my samples that I've taken when I'm in the lab. And this is what a juvenile sporophyte little blade looks like. So when we're in a lab, we're trying to grow them to this stage, and then we're trying to put them out into the ocean so that they grow into this larger stage within, depending on the period of time and the time of year, how many months, hopefully anything up to 3 to 6 months. So it's a complex life cycle, and it's also involved in the ocean. They have numerous issues. Storms can blow them all apart, so they don't find each other. They can have changing conditions. They can be stuck in different places, so the males may not find the females. So that's very complex. And also predation. They may be eaten before they get from even the fertilized stage to the juvenile stage. So it's a complex life cycle, and there's a lot having to happen in the right sequence for them to get from here to there to then become an adult plant. So then the next part of this little story is who lives with them. So here's an image of Macrosisters, the giant kelp in California, where I mentioned it lives. And you can see the water looks a bit cloudy, so there's lots of bacteria, lots of phytoplankton, lots of smaller algae that live with them. But here there's another image. This is a different kelp species, and these are epiphytes, this red stuff that sits on the outside of all of this very large seaweed. And in some cases, they can be positive, in some cases negative. So they can live off them, and they can be symbiotic, or they can actually take away the nutrients from the kelp, and they can grow a bit slower. Here's another species here. You can see there's a lot of coral underneath, and they connect to it. When they die off and end up blowing up onto the beach, you end up with basically a massive detritus. And if anybody's aware of that word, it just really indicates things that are dying and breaking down. And in this environment, you'll have anything from different crabs, you'll have crustaceans, you'll have bacteria, all eating it. And then here, it's a floating image. And this one's pretty interesting. It shows you then basically the potential of other species that are living on it. And you can have anything from 100 different species living off a massive seaweed in the ocean, and the densities can even change from up to 1 million individuals within a meter squared, according to some recent research. I'm just going to quickly give you a picture. Hopefully this will work well. This is from NOAA, which is the American Oceanography Association, and this is a kelp forest. So as you can see, lots of snow, what we call marine snow. So this is all the other microorganisms in the water, and there's your beautiful seals loving that environment. So it's Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened with my internet at that point. So if there's any questions. Oh, okay. We're still waiting. Okay, I'm going to double check with the moderator and see what happened. Yep.
I think there was a problem. You logged out of the meeting for like 10 minutes, I think. I don't know if you were still presenting or there was something, or there was a problem on your side.
That's okay.
We were waiting. So I don't know if the presentation was done or not.
I wasn't done. I literally only stopped talking a couple of seconds ago. So is there anything I can do to get back in and just finish? Can anyone tell me where?
Yeah, it was after the video. You stopped the
Oh,
video.
okay. And then maybe it logged out. Oh, okay. Hold on. Right. Well, can
Okay.
can
You
you
need to share your screen
Yeah,
like
I can
the other
share.
side.
And I'll do share entire screen again. Oh God, that's a bit of a nightmare. Okay.
I will give you the floor then.
Okay, hold on. So if you could stay there for a second, just so I can click through to where I was. That is a nightmare. My apologies, everybody. That's a bit of a crazy thing to happen. Okay, that's where I was. Okay, is that where? Can you help me with that one? Is that where we're at? Oh, are you gone?
Yes.
Can you see? Can everybody see that screen now? Because I can't see you guys.
We can see your screen.
Okay. Alrighty. Sorry. Apologies, everybody. I don't know what happened.
We cannot see your screen. I think you are not sharing.
Okay. Hold on. Let me see. Share audio and share. All right. Sharing. Share. All right. Okay. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect. Now I need to see your presentation.
Okay. Let me go into where I thought I was at. Wow, the world of internet. Here, I think that's where we're at. Okay, so we were there and that's where we stopped.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. All right. Apologies, everybody, the world of the internet and myself. Okay. So where I got to was just the threats. So the threats that are in place at the moment with the giant kelp run from the octonauts here, the red urchin, which impacts kelp and specifically destroys the roots of the giant kelp, which is very unuseful if you are a positively buoyant species that can float up into the ocean. And if you have no roots, you will float away. Diseases that also impact the giant kelp are here. The several species that several issues that occur in the lab. Everything from this one here, the twisted frond. I've had this one here, the white spot. So diseases are a major issue within controlled environments, but also in the ocean. Human activities, as we know, if we've got too much nutrients in the ocean, we have eutrophication. Pollution is also a major concern. Overfishing and harvesting. Overfishing is probably a bigger concern at the moment. Harvesting has been reduced for seaweed species. And the climate change concern, obviously, after COP26, we're all well aware that the world is getting warmer. This is the beautiful country of New Zealand, and it's showing 100 years of change. So as you can see here, the southern island of New Zealand is where the giant kelp mainly grows around. And potentially, if the temperature does increase by a couple of degrees, it will impact its ability to live in that environment. So what happens when the giant kelp itself is lost to the ocean? Well, there are several others that will take over in any environment, whether you're in, as I say, in a school, in a classroom, if somebody takes your spot, somebody else will pop in. And as we mentioned with the urchins, there's not much left if the urchins themselves take over. So you can see here, you've got urchins and nothing else. And if they do start to chew away at the giant kelp and remove its roots, then you will have very little option except to have a very barren environment. And then the turf species here, these are really teeny tiny seaweeds that are a couple of millimeters high, but they are nowhere near the size and the structure of the ecosystem a kelp forest can contribute. And then here, the microalgae, these are obviously a seaweed, is what a microalgae are also called, but they are very, very small. So the issue here is that we have overfishing, warming, and storms, which can impact the giant kelp and end up creating a potential urchin barren rather. Warming and eutrophication again can lead to the turf reef occurrence, and then warming, invasions, cooling, and ice loss are all contributory factors here. So you can see there's a lot of different impacts that can threaten it. At the moment, we've lost something like 2% of kelp forest per year in the last several decades. So it's a major concern. So where they live at the moment, this is, as I say, the image I've shown you in the slide. So it shows you here the area of North America, South America, New Zealand, and Australia. And the projections at the moment for potentially where we're going to have impacts, you can see all the other colours of the other kelp species. This image is trying to get you to digest information that potentially is saying, modelling where the kelp will live in the future. So roughly in the next 20 years, we're looking at the reds being bad, the grey being bad, and the blue being good. So you can see with this image, the blue areas are probably the smallest. The grey areas are particularly large, and the red areas aren't much different. So the North American coastline is going to be quite heavily hit. The South American coastline very badly hit as well, especially for Macrosistes, my giant kelp species. Southern edge of Australia as well. You can see here this zero area is growing rapidly. This is where the giant kelp are in major decline, and here in Australia also. So there's major concerns here about where the giant kelp will live in the future. The next question I'm sure you have is where are they going to, who's helping and what are we doing? So there's huge amounts of work being done, and restoration is the main word to kind of cover that. Here you can see again, like we've mentioned, the octonauts, these divers are taking away and ripping out the urchins that have taken over in California. And then a group in Norway are showing again where you've removed the urchins, they've now put in a load of kelp baby plants to replace them. Here in these bottom images, you've got the artificial forest, which is basically the idea is creating a reef in place where the giant kelp can adhere to it, and putting a load of rocks onto the flat sandy bottom so that they've got something to grab onto. And the network at the moment, and this is one group that I'll mention, they are pretty much almost covering the majority of the areas where the giant kelp and other species of kelp are living. And this group are actually working on putting kelp back into these locations. And they're doing it using this system here. It's called green gravel. So they actually have pieces of kelp which have a little weight at the bottom, which disintegrates as the kelp grows and adheres to the bottom. And like myself in the lab at the moment, they're growing up little plants. And what's really cool here is that these little plants then, when you drop them into the ocean, into crevices specifically, they grow up quite nicely into adult plants. And you can throw these off the back of a boat, no problem at all. They do not need to be put into specific places via divers, which can be very expensive. And they do grow and can potentially restore the environment. So this is the group. They're called Green Gravel Action. And they are as I say, a multifaceted, multi-university institute group that are working very well to produce and restore areas and repopulate them with kelp species, and specifically Macrosistes. The work I'm doing at the moment is looking really at the aquaculture side of things. So I'm looking at controlling, once you get the source tissue from the particular fronds of species, in my case, giant kelp, we are looking at creating a very happy, healthy gametified zoospore group that are then fertilized and then produce these little juvenile sporophytes, which we then put back into the ocean. And within, as I say, anything from 3 to maybe even 6 months, we potentially have several meters of very, very happy seaweed that we can use for aquaculture. So we can use it for bioproducts, which is my research area, but also they can be used, as I've mentioned previously, for restoration. And so we basically go from a very mini micron size to meter size. So we go from these little ones that are microscopic down the mic down to several meters of wonderfully healthy, happy kelp growing in the ocean. So what next for kelp? Well, there's numerous places where kelp are used already, as I've mentioned, and food and flavoring is an area that needs some help because there's legal and legislation that needs to be changed. Bioplastics, those of you who are using bioplastics at the moment in your supermarkets for one-use plastics that are biodegradable, that's another area where kelp is potentially going to assist. Maranova is a Hobart-based, Tasmanian-based cosmetic company who've been working on seaweeds for some time. They're looking at more basically cosmetics and creams, etc. That area, cosmeceuticals, nutraceuticals for kelp. Biofuels, which used to be very exciting for microalgae, is now becoming important again, and certain companies are looking into it as a fuel. As I say, I'm working in both the aquaculture area to try and produce optimal conditions for growing kelp, and then potentially producing anything from foods, bioplastics in it, and potentially cosmetics from it, and even fertilizers. And also kelp are pretty fascinating because they are bioremediators. This means they soak up lots of pollutants that are in the water and they can hold on to them. So they are potentially scrubbers in the ocean as well. So a fascinating group of organisms. And you're all going to ask me now what you can do. So those of you who are sitting in your classrooms wondering what you can do, well, the phrase reduce, reuse, recycle, I'm sure you've all heard before, but it is crucial. If we can use less plastics and we can recycle everything that we're doing, and maybe reduce the amount of time we're spending, in a car, maybe cycle to school or walk to school, all of those things will help to keep those temperatures down, and keep the planet in a good spot so it doesn't hit these higher temperatures that we're concerned about. Eating more seaweeds is obviously going to be very important for our health. Seaweed has huge amounts of micro and macronutrients, and it's really where we need to be thinking about if we want seaweeds to be grown more and put back into the ocean more often and added to the ocean environment. We need to encourage that. And these are all the methods of ways in which you can contact me. I've got a YouTube video that I produced last week for Science Week. I'm on Twitter. These are my emails, so feel free to contact me there. And these are all my co-authors. This is a big project with lots of assistance from colleagues at Teagasc and Cawthron, and also from the EU. Thank you very much for your time.